So anxious, my thoughts soft like winter. In your passion, I was lost.
Coding Dojo is a programming school that turns beginners into developers in only 14 weeks. Over 90% of their grads land jobs within 3 months of graduating, often making over $70K per year. To learn more, visit codingdojo.com or click the link in the description below. Hey guys, I had a request from one of my patrons to do a video on node authentication with JSON Web Tokens, or JWT, and these tokens are used to protect routes in an API. That way you can add authentication to fetch a token, and then you can make requests with that token to access protected routes. So if you have a full stack application where you have like a Node API on the back end and then React on the front end, you can make your request to log in, do all the login stuff, and then get the token back, save that in local storage or cookies or wherever you want to save it locally, and then you can use that token to make requests to protected routes, like let's say to create a blog post or something like that. All right, now we're not going to build a complete API here. We're not going to implement Passport or authentication or anything like that. We're just going to have like a mock user. My goal is to just show you how to protect routes and then how to get the token and use that token to access the route. All right, so it's kind of an off-the-cuff video. We're using Postman to make our requests. This is now a standalone program. It was a Chrome extension. I believe it's deprecated as a Chrome extension now. So that's what we'll be using to make our requests. We're using VS Code for a text editor, and I'm using my VS Code terminal here. So I have an empty folder called Node Auth API. So if you want to follow along, just create a folder, and then we're going to do an npm init to create a package.json. I'll just go through this description. I'll just say JWT example, and I'm going to use app.js for the entry point, and then just enter through the rest. All right, so now what we'll do is install our dependencies. So npm install, we're just going to have express and JSON web token, all one word. Okay, I'm also going to install NodeMon because that will just continuously watch our application, so we don't have to restart it to, if we make changes or whatever. And we're going to install that globally, so we're going to do an npm install -g and then NodeMon. All right, and then once we do that, let's clear that up. We're going to create our app.js file, and let's open that file up. I'm just being fancy with the terminal. Of course, you can create it up here. So in our app.js, let's go ahead and bring in Express. Okay, and let's see. We also want to bring in JSON Web Token, so that's going to come in as, we'll name it JWT, and that's going to come in as JSON Web Token. Then we want to initialize our app variable with Express. Okay, and then I'm just going to create like a welcome route for the index. Actually, we'll do /API, and we'll put a arrow function here, and of course we need our request response. All right, and then in here, all I'm going to do is do a res.json, and we're going to send along a message, and we're just going to say welcome to the API. Okay, so there's a simple route, and we're going to now listen. I'm going to have our server listen on port 5000. Oops. And then we'll just do our console log. Server started on 5000. All right, so let's save that, and let's run NodeMon down here in the terminal. So our server started. Now we should be able to make a request to this /API, and we should get that message back. So let's say HTTP, do I have it here? HTTP localhost 5000 /API. Make sure it's a GET request and send, and we get welcome to the API. So far, so good. Now I want to create a route that I want to protect. So let's do an app.post to /API/posts. And let's say request res. And obviously, we're not really going to create a post or anything. We're not using a database. I'm just going to do a res.json. And we'll just do the end result, which will be a message that says post created. Okay, so we should be able to make that. We haven't protected anything yet, so we should be able to make a post request to API/posts, and we get post created. All right, so now we're going to start to implement our JSON Web Token. We need a way to get the token, and we're going to create a route for that. So that's going to be a login route. So let's say post/API/login. All right, let's put our request response. And inside here, what we want to do is we want to call jwt.sign. Now, I'm actually going to open up the documentation here. And you can do this either synchronously or asynchronously. If you're doing it synchronously, you can set a variable to jwt sign, pass in your payload, and then a secret key, which can be whatever, and then you can go ahead and use that. Or you can do what we're going to do, and we're going to use we're just going to use a callback function. We're going to do it asynchronously. So let's do jwt sign. Oh, I forgot to create a user. So we're just going to create a mock user. Now, usually you would make a request to this login, and you'd be sending your username and password. You'd go through all your authentication stuff here with your database, and then you get your user back. So we're going to skip right to getting the user back. So I'll say ID1, username, Brad, and let's do email, brad@gmail. All right, so we have our user, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this along as the payload. So this will be, we'll say user. So payload, next parameter will be the secret key. And you can see over here, jwt sign, they sent the payload here, and then there's the secret key. So that can be whatever. All right, and then since we're using the asynchronous version, we're going to go ahead and put a callback, or an arrow function in this case. And this will take in an error if there is one, and then it'll take the token. It'll give us the token. All right, so then what we want to do is just send a response. So res.json, and we're going to send along token, and we're going to send the token. All right, we can even do this ES6 style and get rid of that. Same thing here. Since these are both the same, we can just do like that. All right, and yeah, let's save. So now we'll try and log in. So we'll go to a post request to API/login and send, and there it is. So we get our token back. Okay, so this token contains all the information we need to make a request to a protected route, which we don't have yet. All right, so let's go ahead and go to our route we want to protect, which is this right here, this posts. And we're just going to add in right here a middleware function called verify token, like that. Okay, and then we need to create that function. So we'll go down here, and let's just say verify token and function verify token. All right, so this is going to take in, this is actually a middleware function. It's going to take in a request, response, and next. So basically it's going to run, we want to do what we want, and then call next to proceed. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we want to get the auth header value. So when we send our token, we want to send it in the header, okay? And we want to send it as the authorization value. So I'm going to create a variable here. We're going to call it bearer header. And we're going to set it to request.headers. And then we want the authorization part of it. So authorization like that. And that should give us the bearer header, or I'm sorry, the actual token. Now the way that this token is going to be formatted, let's say format of token. So it's what's called a bearer token. So it's going to look like this. Authorization. It's going to have the word bearer like that, and then it's going to be the token. So we'll say access token. All right, so it's going to look like that, and then we need to pull the token out of it. So we need to do a couple things down here. So first thing we're going to do is check to see if it's not undefined. So we'll say check if bearer, I can't ever spell this while I'm talking, bearer is undefined. So we'll say if, and we're going to use type of. So if type of bearer header is not equal to undefined, then we want to continue, else then it's going to be forbidden. All right, and we can actually just send a 403 status. So if we say res.send status, I mean, you can do a .json if you want, res.json, and put your own message here, but I'm just going to send a 403. All right, now let's just try that out. So we'll save that, and we're going to go and try to make a request to API posts, which has the verified token middleware. And if we don't send the token, we should get the 403 status. So I'm going to open a new tab and go to HTTP. Let's go to localhost 5000 API posts. Make sure it's a post request and send, and it gives us back forbidden. Okay, so that's exactly what we want. We can't access it without a token. So let's go back into the verify token function, and we need to basically take the token out of the bearer space token. So what we'll do is we're going to split at the space, because it's going to be bearer, the word bearer, space, and then the token. So I'm going to say const bearer equals, and then we want the bearer header, and we're going to do dot split. What dot split does is it turns a string into an array, and you can put here what you want to split it by, and it's going to be a space. So it's going to look at this bearer space token, and it's going to separate the two by a space and turn it into an array. So in that case, this will be the second part of the other second value in the array, which has a 1 index, because arrays are 0 base. So this would be 0, this would be 1. So let's go on the next line, and let's say get token from array. So we'll say const bearer token and set that to bearer with the index of 1. All right, then we want to actually set the token by simply saying request.token and setting that to the bearer token. Okay, and then we simply want to call the next middleware by saying next. And that's it. That's our verified token function. So let's go ahead and save that. Let me just double check this. That should be good. So now what we need to do is when we enter this protected route here, API post, we need to verify the token. Okay, and let me actually just pull up the documentation for that. So let's see. So we already did the sign. Let's see, right here, JWT verify token. Right here, verify token, and then we also want to pass in that secret key as a parameter. But we're going to do it the asynchronous way, like this. And we should be able to get the data, the payload that we passed in. So when we logged in, right here we passed in the user, we should be able to get that data as well. So let's go to our post route here, and let's go right here, and we'll say jwt.verify. And inside here, we're going to pass in the token. Now, that token is now in that request object. So we can say request.token, and then we want our secret key. And then we want a callback, or an arrow function in this case. And this is going to take in two things. It's going to take in error, and then the data. I'm going to call this auth data, because it's basically going to be our authentication data, our user, the ID, username, and email. And then inside this verify, we'll first check for an error. So we'll say if there is an error, then let's go ahead and send that 403 status. So res.send status, and we're going to send, I'm going to send 403, and let's do else. Then we're going to take this res.json right here, and we're going to just move this up into the else, and we'll send the message post created. Let's also send the auth data. Okay, so we'll get the message post created, we'll get the auth data. We should also get the timestamp that this was created, I believe. Yeah, let's just try that. So we'll save. We'll go back to Postman. Now, if we try to make a request here, again, we get forbidden. That's expected. We need to include our token. So the token we got when we logged in. Now, if you had a front-end app, a front-end client with, like, let's say React or something, or whatever, vanilla JavaScript, you would save this token in local storage. You could also use cookies, but that's not really recommended anymore. You want to use local storage. And then when you want to make a request to a protected route, you want to send in a header value for authorization. So we'll say authorization, and we're going to say in here, bearer space, and then the token. Okay, so let's try this. We'll go ahead and click send, and there we go. Post created. We get our message. We get our auth data, which includes the payload that we sent here. Okay, so when we did JWT sign, we sent the user. That's what we're getting here, and then we get this IAT, which is issued at, I think. What does this stand for? I'm pretty sure it's issued at. Yeah, issued at. So you can include a timestamp, but if you don't, it'll give you this issued at timestamp. So now you can continue to make this request as long as you have that header, that token, okay, present in your header, this here. If I go ahead and I uncheck this and I don't send this header value along with it, we get forbidden. Okay, if I were to change this in any way, like let's just put a 1 here and send, we get forbidden. Okay, so it has to be this exact token. Now another thing we can do is we can set an expiration. If we want this token to not last forever, we can do that. So let's go to, let's see, I can make this smaller here. We want to go to the login where we do the sign, and we just want to put in some options right here. So we'll put in an object like that, and then in here we're going to say expires in, and then we can say, we can do like 30s for 30 seconds, we can do minutes, and this is all in the documentation. Let's see, so these are all the options you can use, and expires in is one of those. So you can do like 2 days, you can do 10 hours, you can use all those different formats. So let's do 30 seconds. All right, now we're going to have to make another request to log in to get a new token. So what we'll do is, let's get rid of that. And then we'll go back to our login and let's send. So now we get a new token. Notice it's a little bigger because it now includes that expiration. So we'll copy, we'll go back to posts, we'll put in our authorization, and we'll say bearer space, and then paste in our token and send. It works. Okay, I'm going to keep trying, and it should expire within 30 seconds. So it should not work pretty soon. And you can see it's actually one of the values, EXP. So this is issued at and expiration. Send again, and now it's forbidden, okay, because it expired. So you can do that as well. All right, so I know this isn't like the most put together thing, but hopefully this gives you an idea of how to protect your routes, how to get a token, and then how to use that token to access protected routes. And obviously we're using Postman as our client, but you could just as well have a React application or an Angular application and use the HTTP client there and just send along your authorization in the header with the token. All right, first login and so on. But of course you're going to want to have a form submitted to login and do your magic here to authenticate the user, get that user, and then include that user here, not just create one like this. This is just a mock-up. All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and hopefully it was somewhat clear. And that's it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time. Coding Dojo is a programming school that turns beginners into developers in only 14 weeks. If you're serious about landing a career in tech but lack the formal education or background, Coding Dojo will get you there in no time. With over 3,000 graduates to date, over 90% of their grads land jobs within 3 months of graduating, often making over $70K per year at tech firms of all sizes, from companies like Google to local startups. To learn more, visit codingdojo.com or click the link in the description below.
Everyone, my name's Kyle, and this is Web Dev Simplified.
Let's learn how to deploy a project with Docker. Hello and welcome. I'm Dave. Today we'll learn the basics of deploying with Docker, and I'll provide links to all resources in the description below. I'll also provide a link for you to join my Discord server where you can discuss web development with other students and you can ask questions that I can answer and receive help from other viewers too. I look forward to seeing you there. It seems like every time I try to rely on a free hosting service or other service for my students, the rug gets pulled out from under me. Hello and welcome, I'm Dave. Today we'll learn the basics of deploying with Docker, and I'll provide links to all resources in the description below. I'll also provide a link for you to join my Discord server where you can discuss web development with other students, and you can ask questions that I can answer and receive help from other viewers too. I look forward to seeing you there. It seems like every time I try to rely on a free hosting service or other service for my students, the rug gets pulled out from under me and that free tier is removed. And we've gone through this with Heroku and REPL when they also removed their teams for education and now have paid deployments. And just recently PlanetScale removed their free MySQL tier. And I agree with this tweet as well. So I hope I'm not jinxing myself today. We're going to learn how to easily deploy a PHP Apache server with a Docker container on render.com. So what is Docker? Well, think of it as a tool where you can package everything up neatly, all of the dependencies and settings that are required to run your project into a container. And then that container can be shipped to other computers and run on those computers just like it does yours. One way to do this is build a Docker file, and then we can ship the Docker file with the rest of our code repository to GitHub, which can automatically deploy this to a host like render.com. Docker images that you can create containers from. And you can search for images, and you can see I've already pulled up PHP and it has an official Docker image, but there are different images of PHP. So I wanted the latest version, essentially 8.2, and if we scroll down, you can see where they show from PHP 8.2 here. Now notice this isn't what I'm using as a parent image, I'm using one with Apache also. So let's scroll down a little further where it discusses Apache, and one thing I wanted to point out when I find where this is, that they don't actually use the latest one in their Apache example. So you could use PHP 7.2, but really PHP 8.2 is available. So that's what I'm going to use. And I just plugged the number 8.2 in here instead of 7.2. So this is how we pull this Docker image in, the parent image, and we're going to base the image we build on this official PHP Apache image. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the video. And then under this, it says if you have any specific PHP extensions required, you could install them here. For example, if you need MySQL support, and there's a line for that I have commented out. However, I wanted Postgres. Now there's a reason as well. So you can see this is a very simple file. It has the name of the service under service. It has a version at the top, and then under build, it has a context, and the context symbol. Just a simple index.php over here in the file tree as an example, and it's printing out the server. And a little progress every day will go a very long way. Please give this video a like if it's helped you, and thank you for watching and subscribing. You're helping my channel grow. Have a great day, and let's write more code together very soon.
Now, if you're anything like me, you've probably heard of JWT, you've maybe even seen a few videos on it, but you still have absolutely no idea how JWT really works or even why you would actually want to use it. So today in this video, I'm going to answer all of those questions for you. First, I'm going to tell you what JWT is, then I'm going to talk about why you should use JWT, and finally, I'm going to show you exactly how JWT works and how you can use it yourself. So let's get started now. First, before we can get into the nitty-gritty details of exactly how JWT works, we need to understand what JWT is used for. And JWT is just for authorization, not authentication. They're slightly different. With authentication, what you're doing is you're taking in a username and a password and authenticating to make sure that username and password is correct. It's like logging a user in. But authorization is actually making sure that the user that sends requests to your server is the same user that actually logged in during the authentication process. It's authorizing that this user has access to this particular system. And the way that this is normally done is by using session. So for example, you have a session ID that you send down in the cookies of the browser, and then every time the client makes a request, they send that session ID up to the server, and the server checks its memory, says, okay, what user has that session ID? It finds that user, and then it does the authorization to make sure the user has access. But JWT, instead of actually using these cookies, it uses a JSON web token, which is what JWT stands for, to do the authorization. Let's actually look at a quick graph to explain the differences. First, we're going to take a look at a more traditional user login system that uses sessions and cookies to store the user. So the first thing that happens is the user actually logs in from the client by posting to some kind of login service with their email password, for example. And as soon as that gets to the server, what's going to happen is the server is going to do the authentication to make sure that that user is correct. And if that user is correct with the email password, what they're going to do is they're actually going to store that user inside the session, which is stored in the memory of the server. And they're going to get a unique ID that corresponds with that part in memory. And they're going to send that ID back to the browser using a cookie so that the browser always has that session ID that it sends up to the server every single time it makes a request. So for example, down here, when the client needs to make another request, for example, they want to go to a new page in the application, that session ID gets sent along with the cookie that it corresponds with. So since it's a cookie, it gets sent along to the server. And at the server, what happens is it's going to do the calculation. It's going to go into the session memory and it's going to check, do I have something in memory that corresponds to this particular ID that gets sent to me? If so, then it's going to say this is the user that corresponds with that ID, and it has the access to that user because it stored that user in the session memory. So now the application knows this is the user I'm working with. Are they authorized to access this information? If they are authorized, then it sends the response back to the browser saying, okay, everything's good. Here's the information you were looking for. The other form of authentication we have here is JWT. So I'm going to get these so we can see both of them on the screen. And it works very similarly at the beginning. We make a post request with our email password and we send that along to the server just like before. But instead of storing information on the server inside session memory, what happens is the server creates a JSON web token, this JWT, and it actually encodes and serializes that and signs it with its own secret key. So the server knows that if you tamper with it, then it's invalid. It can actually check that based on the fact that it signed it with a secret key. Then it takes that JSON web token and it sends it back to the browser. And notice the main difference here is nothing is stored on the server. The server doesn't store the user. Nothing actually happens on the server. This JWT has all the information about the user built into it. So it sends that JWT back down to the browser, and the browser can choose to store that however it wants. For example, you could do cookie storage and it would work very similarly to over here. But any way that it happens, the client is then going to send a request to the server, and they're going to make sure to include that JSON web token so that it knows what user it's authenticating with. And the server, what it does is it signed that JSON web token with its own secret key. So what it does is it verifies that this JSON web token has not been changed since the time that it signed it. Because if, for example, the client changed it and changed the user information in that JSON web token, the server will now know and they can say that it's invalid. But if, for example, nothing actually got tampered with, the JSON web token is correct, now what happens is it just deserializes that JSON web token and it says, okay, this is the user information. It's stored in that token already, so it knows exactly what to do with that user, and if that user is authorized to use that resource, it'll send that response back down to the client. Now, really the main difference that you're going to notice between these two is that in the session version, the information about the user is stored on the server. So the server actually has to do a lookup to find the user based on the session ID. But with the JWT, the JSON web token, what happens is the user information is stored in the actual token, which means it's stored on the client. And the server doesn't have to remember anything, which is great because it means you can use the same JSON web token across multiple servers that you run without having to run into problems where one server has a certain session and the other server doesn't. I'm going to go into a lot more depth on why this is really important and how this makes JWT so powerful later in this video, but next I want to show you exactly how JWT actually signs its tokens and how it can store the user information. Here I am on a site called jwt.io, and I'm going to link this in the description so you can mess around with it yourself if you want. But essentially what we have is two different panes. On the left, we have the encoded version of our JSON web token. This is what you send to and from the client, and this is how you authorize the user for different resources. On the right, we have the decoded version of that JSON web token, which has three distinct parts. It has a header, which determines the algorithm that you're actually using to encode and decode this. It has the payload, which is just going to be all the information you store in the token. And lastly, and most importantly, we have the signature, which allows us to verify that the token hasn't been changed by the client before it gets sent back to us. So the very first thing we want to look at is the header. And as you can see over here, the header is always before the very first period inside of this, and it's just base 64 encoded. So here we have our header, and this is just determining our algorithm and our JWT token type. And really, this is only useful for our signature portion at the very end where we're verifying it. So we're going to kind of skip over this and go into the second section, which is our data. And this comes in between the two other periods. It's really nice. JWT actually separates things by periods, so it's very visually easy to see what the different sections are. So here we have our data section, as I mentioned, and this is where you're going to put all of your different data for your application. And there's some very common fields that you're going to see across all different JWTs. For example, this SUB, which stands for subject, this is just going to be most likely the ID of the user you're authenticating. Lots of times you would store this in the session inside of your database or inside of your server, but here you're just storing this ID directly in the token you're sending back to the user. Next, we have other fields. You can put anything you want in here. For example, we just have a name field here for the user's name, but like I said, you can put anything in this data component. These are just some common fields that you may all the time see. Another one that's really common is IAT, which stands for issued at. And really what this is saying is when the token was created. This is really useful if you want to actually expire tokens. And you will notice a lot of tokens will also have something called EXP or EAT, which is going to stand for expired at. And this is just the date that the token no longer becomes valid. And it's important a lot of times to have an expire date on your tokens because otherwise someone else could take your token and use that to authorize themselves as you. And if it doesn't expire, they can just use that forever and ever and ever, always saying that they're you, even though they actually are not. So you need some way to expire your tokens so that sort of activity does not happen to your users. Lastly, most importantly, we have this verify signature at the bottom. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow you to actually verify that the user did not mess with the token before it got sent back to you. And the way that it does that is it actually takes the first two portions of the token, so it takes your header and it base 64 encodes it. So you have this red section, and then it adds a period, and you have the purple section, which is the base 64 encoded payload. So base 64 encodes both of those sections and combines them with a period. Essentially all it does is it takes your header and it takes your payload and it combines them together. So you have all of the data as it was when you sent it down to the user. And then what it does is it uses the algorithm, which is defined in the header here, HS256. You can change this algorithm if you want, but this is just a good one to use. It uses that algorithm and actually a secret key, which you can define yourself. For example, we could just define a key called secret. That's a terrible secret key, but just for this example, we'll use it. And then what happens is it uses this algorithm up here, HS256, and it encodes your data portion, so essentially all of your header information and your data information. It takes all of that and it encodes it using your specific secret key. And that's what this blue section is. It's the encoded version of your data that you have sent to the client. So now if the client changes the data, for example, they remove this 6 from their data, now you can see immediately the signature is not going to match. Because when the client or when the server gets the information from the client, what they're going to do is they're going to decode this top section. They're going to combine it together. Down here, as you can see, they're going to base 64 encode the header. They're going to base 64 encode the payload. And then they're going to hash it with the particular algorithm. And they're going to check, does it match the last portion of the key? If it does match the last portion of the key, then you know that the user did not mess with anything. But if when they hash it, as you can see up here, they get a different result. For example, when you hash this information, you are not going to get this blue section. So they know immediately that this key has been tampered with and that the data in the JWT is no longer valid. And that's why you can actually store user information on the client and you can actually trust that they haven't changed it, because they would have to have your secret key. If they ever did get access to your secret key, then they would be able to fake changes. But that's actually not going to happen as long as you safely store your secret key on your server and inaccessible to other people outside of that server. And hopefully that made sense. This really essentially works a lot like password hashing in the fact that the header up here and the payload are actually combined together and then hashed in a way that they cannot be unhashed. And the way that it checks here, this blue section, is just the hash of those two. So anytime your data is changed, the two hashes will no longer match, which means that you know that the data that the client is sending you is not the same as what you originally sent them yourselves. Only when those two information pieces match do you know that they're exactly the same. Now that we've talked a lot about how JWT works, what it is, we should finally talk about why you would want to use JWT. And let's take a look at a very simple example of one of the most common use cases of JWT. Here we have two different servers. We have a bank that owns a server that runs all of their banking applications, their banking website, all of the bank information you could think of. But they also own a separate server, and this takes care of all of their retirement plans. They allow people to invest and do retirement plans on a completely separate web application. But they want their users that log into the bank to also be able to be automatically logged into the retirement account. So when they switch from the bank to the retirement server, they don't want the user to have to re-log back in, especially if they make this transition very seamless to the user so it looks like they're on the same application. This is really common in a lot of larger scale industries and applications and companies. So what happens is the client makes a request here to the bank. They say, okay, I want some bank information, blah, blah, blah. They do all their banking stuff. And then finally, they get to the point where they actually want to access the retirement information. And if you have a normal session-based server, what happens is your session is stored here inside of the bank and not inside of the retirement server. So what happens is your user needs to log back in because they need to be able to have their session stored on the retirement server because the session ID from the client is not found in the retirement server. But when you're using JWT, if you share the same secret key between both your bank and your retirement server, then all you need to do is send the same JWT from the client to both of them, and you'll be authenticated both times without having to relog back in. I know this is a little bit confusing to wrap your head around at first, but essentially, we're storing the user information on the client, while in the old cookie session version, we store it on the server. And since we have two separate servers, we need to have the information stored on both of them. But that's not very easy to do or very possible. So what usually happens is you have to store it on one place, and then the user has to relog in when they go to the other place. But with JWT, since the user information is stored in that token on the client, it doesn't matter if they access the bank server, the retirement server, or any other server that this bank owns. They're still going to be logged in because they have the same exact token, and all of the servers can recognize that token as long as they have that same secret key on the server. Another time that this is really useful, same kind of example with multiple servers, is let's say, for example, we had two bank servers. The bank was very large and they needed two different servers to be able to handle all of the users that were coming to the server. And they had some form of load balancer out in front that distributed traffic to the different servers. Let's say that your client was accessing server A for a while, and then this server A got really busy, so it moved that client over to server B over here. Their session is no longer stored on server B, it's only on server A, so the user has to relog back in when this happens. And with JWT, you don't have to worry about that because, like I mentioned earlier, the user is stored on the client. That's really the important thing about JWT, is the user is stored on the client. So no matter how many different servers you have, no matter how many different applications, load balancers, or anything that you have, It doesn't matter, the user can always authenticate with any of those servers as long as you have the same secret key between them. Another instance where this is really useful is just you have a lot of really small services, such as microservices, where you may have an API, you may have an actual web server, maybe even something else. You can use that same JWT token from the client to authenticate with any of those different microservices all across your different architecture. And now you know literally everything you need to know about JWT. If you want me to make a video explaining JWT in Node.js, let me know down in the comments below because I would love to make a tutorial on that for you. Also, make sure to check out my other videos linked over here and subscribe to the channel for more videos of me simplifying the web for you. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day. Hello everyone, my name's Kyle, and this is Web Dev Simplified. Now, if you're anything like me, you've probably
Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to build a full-stack block application using MERN-stack, so MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. On the homepage, we are going to fetch all the posts from our Mongo database, and when we click on a specific post, then the information about this post will be fetched, alongside with the information about the author. so you will learn how to join information from different database collections using mongoose and populate function. We have also register and login functionality, so you will learn how to implement authentication to a MERN project using JSON Web Tokens. On top of it, we check that only the author of the post can edit their own posts. So here, for example, I can edit this post because I am the author of this post, but I cannot edit, for example, this one because the author is not me. On the post edit page, we can change title, summary of the post, cover image, and then content of the post. As you can see, for the content, we are using Rich Editor, which allows us to add headers, images, lists, and so on. I can change also the image here to, for example, this one. So as you can see, you will learn also how to build this simple upload functionality. And you will learn many other things, like how to handle coarse errors, how to use React context for storing user information, how to use Mongoose and create models, how to handle relationships with NoSQL databases, JSON Web Tokens for authentication, how to use cookies in a MERN project, some CSS tips and tricks, and much more. The whole project is built from scratch, so there's no starter code or anything, and I tried to make this tutorial super easy to follow, so even if you are a beginner, you shouldn't have any problems with completing this project. As always, all I ask for is that you will smash that like button, and if there's anything specific you want me to build next time, let me know in the comments. And now, without further ado, let's dive into the code. So, as always, we start
An application programming interface, or API, is a way for two computers to talk to each other. Using an API is just like using a website in your browser, but instead of clicking buttons and filling out forms, you write code to explicitly request data from a server. For example, we could visit the NASA website to look at asteroids, or we could use their REST API to request the raw JSON data that is shown on the screen. Now, most APIs in the world are RESTful, which means they follow a set of rules or constraints known as representational state transfer, which has been the de facto standard for API development since the early 2000s. A RESTful API organizes data entities or resources into a bunch of unique URLs, well, technically not URLs, but URIs, or Uniform Resource Identifiers, that differentiate different types of data resources on a server. A client can get data about a resource by making a request to that endpoint over HTTP. The request message has a very specific format. Most importantly, the start line contains the URI that you wish to access, which is preceded by an HTTP verb or request method, which signal your intent with the resource. A GET request means you just want to read the data, while POST means you want to create a new resource. Patch is for updates, delete is for removing data, along with a few other methods beyond those. Below the start line, we have headers, which contain metadata about the request. The accept header can tell the server you want the data in a specific format, or the authorization header can be used to tell the server that you're actually allowed to make that request. Then following the headers, we have the body, which contains a custom payload of data. The server will receive the request message, then execute some code, usually to read from a database, that can then be formatted into a response message. The top of the message contains a status code to tell the client what happened to their request. Codes at the 200 level mean that things went well. At the 400 level, it means something was wrong with your request. And at the 500 level, it means that the server failed. After the status code, we then have the response headers, which contain information about the server. That's followed by the response body, which contains the data payload and is usually formatted in JSON when talking about APIs. Now, an important part of this architecture is that it's stateless, which means that the two parties don't need to store any information about each other, and every request-response cycle is independent from all other communication. And this leads to well-behaved web applications that are predictable and reliable. This has been RESTful APIs in 100 seconds. If you enjoyed it, leave a comment below. Then next week, I'll pick out the best one to win this free t-shirt. And now, it's time to go beyond 100 seconds to build a RESTful API from scratch. The most popular framework for building RESTful APIs in Node is Express.js. It's been around forever, and it's very minimal and easy to learn if you know a little bit of JavaScript. Over the next few minutes, we'll use Express to build our own RESTful API from scratch. You'll learn how to create different endpoints for your API. We'll also look at slightly more advanced concepts like middleware and tools in the cloud for deploying your API, like API gateways. To get started, you'll want to open up VS Code to an empty directory. You'll need to have Node.js installed, and I'm using version 12 for this video. To start a new Node project, let's run npm init y from the command line. This will create a package JSON and give us a context for installing packages that we can use in Node, like Express. Let's go ahead and install Express using npm install. You'll notice that adds Express to our dependencies in the package JSON file. From there, we'll need a file to write our code in, so let's create an index.js file. At the top of that file, we'll declare a variable for app, which represents the actual API that we're building, and its value is an import of the Express package, which itself is a function, so we'll add parentheses after it to initialize it. Now, at this point, our API hasn't defined any endpoints, but let's go ahead and run it anyway. The way you fire up your API on a server is by calling app.listen. That tells it to listen on a specific port, which we've defined as its own separate variable as 8080. Then, as an optional second argument to listen, we can fire a callback, to let us know when the API is ready, and we'll just have it console log the main URL. We can now run the API by going to the terminal and running node period to run that index.js file, and it should console log it's alive on localhost 8080. If we paste the URL into the browser, you can see we get a message of cannot get. That's because we don't have any API endpoint set up yet, but Express is still responding with an error message. In fact, you can open up the network tab in Chrome. If we look closely, we can see that our server responded with a 404 status code, meaning that page was not found. At this point, we know our API is working, but debugging it in the browser is usually not the best option. There are many different ways we can access our API. We could use curl from the command line, we could install a VS Code extension, or we could use a REST client like Insomnia or Postman. I'm going to be using Insomnia throughout the rest of this video because it provides a really nice way to format your requests and also view a history of all your interactions. From Insomnia, we can create a new request, then simply paste in our URL. We can easily change the HTTP verb from the drop-down menu here, click send, and then get the response in a nicely formatted developer-friendly way. We can even see the timeline here with our request in yellow and the response in green. But now we need to get back to our JavaScript and add an endpoint to the API. We can do that by chaining an HTTP verb to the app instance. If you type a period after app, you'll get IntelliSense on a bunch of different methods that live on this object. And you'll notice methods for get, post, patch, etc., which represent different HTTP verbs. If we want to add a get endpoint to the t-shirt URI, we can do that by passing /t-shirt as its first argument. That'll automatically set up our server with that endpoint. Then it's our job to handle a request to it, which we do by passing a callback function as the second argument. Whenever a client or end user requests that URL, it will fire this callback function to handle the request. The function itself provides access to two different objects, the request object and the response object. The request is the incoming data, while the response is the data we want to send back to the client. The most important thing it does is allow us to send a response back to the client. That response can have a status code, like 200 for an OK response. Then we can send a data payload along with it. If we pass a JavaScript object as the argument, then it will send that data back as JSON by default. Let's go ahead and save the file, then restart the server from the terminal. From Insomnia, we can then make a GET request to localhost 8080/t-shirt. When we do that, we get a JSON object back as the response body, with a status code of 200. That's pretty cool, but now let's go back to our code and add a second endpoint, this time a post endpoint, followed by a slash and a dynamic URL parameter that represents the ID of that t-shirt. There might be millions of different t-shirts on this API, and a dynamic URL allows us to handle all of them from a single function. When dealing with a post request, it means that the user is trying to create new data on the server, or create a new t-shirt in this case. First, we need the ID, which we can get from the URL, and its value is made available to us on the request parameters object. Second, we also need a logo for the t-shirt, but the logo is contained in the request body, which, if you remember from earlier, is a custom data payload contained in the incoming request. In other words, the request object in Express allows us to access information from the request message, like the URL parameters, the body, the headers, etc. And now that we have that information, we could use it to save a new record to the database or something along those lines. That's beyond the scope of this video. What we'll do for right now is check to make sure that we have a logo in the request body, and if we don't, then we'll send an error response with a 418 status code and an error message that we need a logo. But assuming we do have a valid logo, we can just send a response with a t-shirt that contains that logo and ID. Now let's go back to Insomnia, and we'll make a post request to that t-shirt endpoint followed by a unique ID. That can be whatever you want. Then in the body section, we'll go ahead and add a request body with a format of JSON, and it's just a JSON object that contains a logo with a string value. If we send that request, you'll notice we get a 500 error response, which means our API code is broken. So what's going on here? It's telling us we have a runtime error because we can't destructure the property logo from the request body. The reason for that is that Express does not parse JSON in the body by default. Not everybody uses Express to build a JSON API, so that's not the default behavior. What we need to do here is set up middleware that tells Express to parse JSON before the actual data hits the function that we're using here to handle the request. When you hear the term middleware, think of shared code that runs before every endpoint callback that you've defined. Very common middleware is built into Express itself. We can refactor our code here a little bit to make a variable for Express, and then we can call app.use to apply middleware. In this case, the middleware we want to apply is the express.json middleware. Now, every request that comes in will first go through this express.json middleware, which will convert the body to JSON, therefore making it available in our post callback. Let's go ahead and save, restart our server, and then go back to Insomnia. And if we send the same exact request, you'll notice this time we get back a successful response. In addition, if we make the logo an empty string and try to send the same request, we get a 418 response along with a message that we need a logo. Congratulations, you just built a RESTful API from scratch with Node.js and Express. But before we wrap up the video, there's one more thing you should definitely know about when it comes to RESTful APIs, and that is the OpenAPI spec, which provides a standard way to describe an API in YAML. It originally came about in something called the Swagger framework. And what it allows you to do is describe your API in a way that can be understood by both humans and machines. And if you're building a serious API, you get all kinds of awesome benefits in the process. Your API will be fully documented, making it much easier for the end user to work with. And because it follows a standard format, you can actually just automatically generate all of your client-side or server-side code. What I'm using right now is a free tool called Swagger Hub, and I can come up here and hit the export button to automatically generate a bunch of boilerplate code. Now, I'm usually not a huge fan of code generators, but there's a more powerful reason to use OpenAPI. When you describe your API with the OpenAPI spec, you can then upload the configuration to tools like API Gateway on AWS or Google Cloud, where it can be secured, monitored, and connected to backend infrastructure. Let me know if you want to see a full tutorial on that topic, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up there. And if you want access to even more advanced content, consider becoming a pro member at Fireship.io. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
Start with an empty directory here in my code editor, and on the right side I have a Chrome browser open with an empty tab, and here we just have in another tab just some content for our blog. But we'll focus here first on the code. I have only an empty directory open here. As you can see, there are no files inside this directory, and here I will start by creating two directories inside. The first one will be client directory, client, for our React app, and the second directory will be for our API, which will be our Express.js app. So let's start with client directory. I will open terminal here, and let's see, we are inside Mern blog directory, but we want to get inside client. So let's start by going inside with cd and client. And now let's install our React app here. So let's do yarn create React app and a dot. So it will be installed here. Now enter, and it will start installing. All right, so now as you can see, it's installed. So inside the client, we have our React app, and API directory is empty for now. So inside our client, we have source, and we have all files for our React app that we can now start with yarn start. So let's do this. Let's do yarn start, enter, and now our app has opened. So let's open app.js, and let's close these files for now, and let's hide our terminal. And let's maybe start by removing all of this, and let's just leave an empty div. Let's put maybe test here. And let's also clear this app CSS inside. Let's just select everything and let's remove it. Let's go back to app.js, and we don't need this logo, that's SVG, so we can remove it as well. Right, so now we see our test here. I will make it a little bigger. And now let's start by putting some HTML structure to our blog. So we want to have some kind of logo, and then navigation like login, register, and create the new article. And then underneath we will have the list of all the articles. Right, so maybe instead of div, let's put main as an element here. And then on the top, we want to have a header. Let's put a header. Inside header, we want to have some kind of logo. So let's do maybe a tag with class name logo. And it will be, well, the logo will be, let's say it will be just my blog. And then after logo, we want to have some kind of navigation with links like login and register. And I think that will be it. So now let's start maybe by putting some styles to our header. So we have header, we have a tag with class name logo, and then we have navigation with two links. Let's go inside app CSS, and let's do some styling. So first, maybe let's add some padding on the main element, like maybe 10 pixels at least. So we'll have some padding from the top and the bottom. Then I think it would be nice to have the whole content centered, so it will be like this. So let's say that the max width will be, I don't know, let's say 600 pixels. 600 pixels, and the margin will be then 0 auto because it should be centered. And now let's see if I make it this big. Yes, it is centered. If I zoom out, oops, here, zoom out, you can see it's centered. Right, maybe I can make it 500 pixels. Right, now let's go and do some header styling. For the header, as you remember, we have two elements. The first is logo, and then we have navigation with two links. So we can do display flex, so those two will be next to each other. And then we can add the space between. So justify content, space between, and then that's how we have a space between those. Right, now maybe we can define how the links inside should look like. So let's do a header, a tag, and well, let's remove decorations. Let's do text decoration none, Let's make them almost black. Let's do color of let's do inherit. So those will inherit black color. That is default, but maybe we can change this black color to make it more grayish. So inside the body, I'll do color of, let's do 333. So now it's not pure black, it's saying more grayish, and I think that would be good. Maybe I will do 222. All right. Now for our logo, I'd like it to be bold. So let's do header a with class name logo. Should be font wave of bold. Yes, I think that's much better. And now for those links are a tags inside the header nav. So let's do header nav, and let's put that this will be also display of flex, but we'll add some gap of let's say 5 pixels, maybe even more. Let's do 15. I think that's much better. All right. Now maybe we can add some margin bottom from the header. So let's do margin bottom, and let's say maybe 50 pixels. So we can have some spacing here from the header to the content that will start somewhere here. Right, back to app.js, and under our header, let's now maybe put some content. So let's maybe put a div with class name entries, entries, and then div with class name entry, and this will be a single entry in our blog. Right, maybe we don't even need this entry, so maybe we can start by removing this. Let's start with a single entry. Inside single entry, we will have an image. Yes, and maybe I will just grab an image from here. I will copy the image address and I will put it here. And well, what else do we want to have? We need a title. So let's use h2s. And for the title, I will put maybe something like this: Full House battery backup coming later this year. And then it will be good to have some kind of a brief entry, to brief description of the post of this entry. Maybe we can call it post. And maybe we can grab I guess today's special event, blah blah blah, up to this point. So I will add a paragraph here, and I'll put this. I'll add this T on the beginning, and well, let's see, that should work. Yeah, and we have it. We have the image. We have some text. So now I will just copy this, and I will put it 2 more times. So we'll have 3 posts with the same images. And now let's fix the styling. So let's go back to our app CSS that is here. And now, first we have this div with class name post. And what's wrong first? This image is too big. So I think that we can start by going all the way up, and let's go and do that. All images should have a max width of 100%. So at the most, all images will take all the available space, all the width of 100%. And max width defined by our main element is this. So that's why this element is this big. All right, the next thing is I would like to have images on the left side, and then title and short description on the right side. And to do this, I will go back to app.js, and let's see, we have image here, and then we have h2 and paragraph. And those two, I will put them inside a separate div, maybe with some class name like content, or maybe texts. And now let's put those two inside. And now those other 2 blog posts, we need to fix them as well, so we'll remove them for now, and I will just recopy the one that we have just fixed. Right, so image, inside each post we have an image, and then we have a div with texts with 2 elements. So now inside our app CSS, we can do that our div with class name post is display of type flex. Yeah, and now maybe we can change that div post image is much smaller. So it's the width of 50 pixels, 50%, sorry, and that's much better. Let's see if this image is stretched. Yes, I think it is. So let's do have auto. This didn't help, and this is because by default all the children inside the flex are stretched from the top to the bottom. So to fix this, I will go back, and inside each post I will put each image that is on the left side, I put it inside a separate div. So let's create a div with class name image, and I'll put the image inside. And now we need to fix this with other 2 posts. So I'll put on the second and on the third as well. So now inside each post we have a div with class name image, and the image is inside, and then we have a div with class name texts, and those 2 elements are inside the header and the description. Right, and now it is much better. Let's go back to app CSS, and let's see, we can remove this with 50%, and yeah, now it's much better. I can remove this, and now let's see, what do we want to do now? We have div with inside div post we have div with class name image, or was it img? It was image. So the image, So this is the left side, the left div, and maybe we can make it even smaller. Let's maybe do a width of 40%. Well, it shouldn't be that small. I think that a better way of fixing this would be to, instead of using flex, using grid here, because this way we can define the grid columns. So let's do grid template columns, and this way we can define the first and the second column. So let's do that. Let's start with 50-50. So let's do 1FR, 1FR, two columns with the same sizing, and let's add a gap here. So let's do a gap of, let's say, 20 pixels. Yes, and now to make the first column smaller, I will do 0.8 FR, and the second will be 1.2 FR. Maybe we can make it a little bigger. Let's do 0.9 and 1.1. Yes, and I think this will work. Now, the next part is we need to fix this header here. So let's do div post and div text h2, and let's remove all the margins to 0. Yes, let's make this a little bit smaller. So let's do font size. Let's do 2 rem, and let's see, that's too big. Let's do 1.6 rem. Oops, 1.6 rem. Yes, I think that's better. I will try to zoom out a little bit to see 100%. Yeah, with 100% view, as you can see, it's kind of small, but that's okay. Let's make it 1.5. And for desktop, let's actually make it wider. So I would do 700 pixels here. So it will be wider. And the logo, I want the logo to be bigger. So let's do a font size of 1.4 rem. Yes, and maybe even bigger. Let's do 1.5. And now the problem is that, as you can see, this logo is not in line with the links. The links should be pulled down a little bit. So for header, let's do align items center, and now they have been pulled down, login and release earnings. Right, but back to our posts. Another thing is I would like to have more spacing between the posts. So let's say it will be margin bottom on the post of, well, at least 35 pixels, I guess. Maybe just 30. Yeah, that's much better. We can maybe increase the padding from the top. So let's do this. We're on the main element with 10 pixels on each side. Maybe we can do on the header, we can add the margin top here as well. The margin top of, let's do 20 pixels. Yeah, so we have some more spacing. Right, let's scroll down here and let's see. Our headers could be a little bit bigger, so let's try with 1.8. Yes, that looks good. Now, one thing I forgot about is we would need to have some kind of more text here between the header and the brief description about the author and the time. So let's go back to our app.js and let's see. Here we have a single post. We have text here, and under the header, let's add a paragraph, maybe with a class name of info. And well, here let's put some. Let's see how others do it. They put like a bold name and then brighter date. So in this info, let's put a span with class name author, maybe a link with class name author instead. And let's put my name for now, and then let's put maybe a time tag with a date. So do 2023 January, and today is 6, and let's say it's 1645. So we have now here a user, author, and the date, only in the first one, but we'll fix it in a minute. I will put also a class name to this brief description of the post. Let's put the class name here, and maybe we can call this one summary of the post. Right, now I'll copy this div text, and I will update on other two posts. So copy and paste, and now let's go back to app.css. Right, and now div.post, and let's see. Let's fix the outer link, and yeah, what was the name of this div? It was info, paragraph info, and let's see. We have a lot of spacing here that we don't want to have. So let's see. I will inspect this element. I'll make this bigger, and let's see. Yeah, on this paragraph we want to have no margin, so it's the margin 0. And now let's change the color to maybe like AAA, so it will be much brighter. And that is too bright. Let's do 888. Let's make it smaller, so let's do font size of 0.7 rem. Let's make it bold. Font wave will be bold. Maybe a little bit of margin, so I will do 10 pixels from the top and the bottom and 0 on the sides. Maybe that's too big. Let's do 6 pixels from the top and the bottom. Yes, that looks good. And now, as you can see, we don't have any spacing here, so I think we can fix it by doing display of type flex and adding some gap of 5 pixels. So now we have some spacing, maybe more spacing, like 10 pixels. Yes, and now for the outer link, let's do div post paragraph info, and then we have a tag with class name author. Let's make color of it of black or almost black. So let's do free. Yes, and that's better. Now let's fix the text underneath. So this summary of the post. So let's do div with class name post because it's inside this post, and then let's do just paragraph summary. Summary of the post. And well, let's do margin. Let's try with 0. Let's do 6 pixels from the top and the bottom and 0 on the sides. That I think that's too little. Let's do 10, and that's better. But now I would like to have more space in between the lines here. So let's do line height of let's try with 1.3 rem. Yes, maybe more. Let's do 1.5. Yes, I think this will work. Let's do 1.4. Yeah, I think this is good enough. Now the next part is I would like to do this login and register page, but first we need to fix routing with our React. So let's go to our app.js, and for now we have only a homepage here, but we need to add some routing. So I'll open my terminal, and in the new tab let's yarn add React router DOM, and we are going to use React router DOM version 6. So let's do this. So first, maybe, as you can see, we have 3 posts with the same content. Maybe we can get rid of those 2, and we can leave only 1, and we can put it as a separate component. So I will cut it from here, and I will create a new component in source. So it's a new file, and let's call this one post.js. And here, let's do just export default function post, and it will just return, and in parentheses, I will just paste it. And back to app.js, and now I will do just post, and now it has been imported for me, and I will add 2 more posts. So let's do post, and that's much better. Maybe we can do even the same for header. So we'll cut it from here, and let's do new file header.js, and export default function header and return. And let's put the header here. Now let's use it inside our app.js header. And it has been imported for me here. So that's nice. And everything looks really nice. So now we can add some routing. So let's here start by putting some routes. So let's do routes. Yes. As you can see, it has been imported from React Router DOM. If imports are not automatically for you, you need to add those lines here. But inside the routes, what do we want to do? Inside the routes, we want to first have our main route for our homepage. So let's do route, and again, it has been imported. And this will be index route for our homepage. And the element will be this whole main thing. So let's maybe try to end it here. And let's see if we can just put it inside. Let's put it like this. And this didn't work yet, but let's see. We have routes. We have our route here. But the last thing that we need to add is we need to go to index.js, and our app needs to be inside the browser router. So let's do browser router like this, and our app needs to be inside. So now it works. Let's go back. And this browser router has been imported for me here. Let's go back to app.js, and we have our first route, that is index route. Let's now add another one. Let's do route, and let's say the next will be a path to /login, and the element will be, well, let's say it will be just a div for now with text login. All right. So now we have two paths, and login link doesn't do anything because we need to fix it. Let's go to header, and login should go to /login. Let's see. Now it works, but we shouldn't use the default HTML links. Instead, we should use link from React Router DOM. So let's import this one. Let's change this one and this one too. Yes, that's much better. Let's go back. If I click login, this doesn't work because I need to change href to /register. Now let's click. Now it works. And as you can see on login page, we have this login text that we added inside app.js. We can put here login page. So we can see here. Right. But the thing is that we want to put all the structure here as well. So let's put this. And instead of the post, we want to put a div with login page. Right. But now, as you can see, we are repeating a lot of stuff. And the main thing is actually that all the routes will have the main element and the header. Here we have in index route, we have main element and the header. And even on the login page, we have main element and the header. To get rid of this, we will define a layout. So first, the main element and the header, we'll put it inside the layout component. So inside our source, let's put new file. Let's call this one layout.js. And let's do export default function layout, and here just return, and we just need here a main element and then the header, and then here we want to have our content that will change. If it's homepage, then we have posts, and if it's login page, we'll have a form and stuff like this. So to do this with our routing, we'll add here an extra component called outlet like this, and it has been imported for me from React Router DOM. And now let's go back to app.js. As you can see, we have two routes here, but now we will, let's say that from the login page, we will just have only this div and no main and header like this. And let's say that for the homepage, we will have just one post like this. And now we want to put layout on our homepage. So to do this, we will put another route here with capital R route. That will be path with just slash. And the element here will be our layout. Yes. And here inside, we will put all those two routes like this. And now we have layout. We can make it shorter, maybe like this. And now, as you can see, we have index route here and route for our login page. And those two are inside this main route that has our layout. And the content from this element sits inside our outlet that we put inside layout here. All right, so now let's go back to app.js and let's see. If I click this, my blog, nothing happens because I need to go back to header and I need to fix this link. So let's do link on the logo, and it should go to just slash, so we can go back to the index page. Right, back to app.js, and let's fix the homepage back. so we can have many posts. For now, as you can see, we have just a single post inside this index page, but I think we can create a new component just for homepage or index page. We can maybe create a different directory just for pages. So let's do pages, and I'll create a new file here, and let's go this one index page, or it could be homepage, doesn't really matter, index page.js. And here let's do export default function index page, and it will return empty tag like this, and I would just put the free posts inside like this. And the last one, we could change this one to div or make it empty, doesn't really matter for React. Right. But now, instead of single post, we can put index page here, and it has been imported. And now we have 3 posts. And let's also fix the login page. So let's do pages, new file, and let's do login page.js, and export default function login page. This is a function. And let's do return, and let's put a div inside login page. And now let's use it inside our app.js. So instead of this login page inside div, we will do login page like this. And let's see if it still works. Yes, it does. So now maybe we have path like this. Maybe we can do the same thing here. We can do just /login. There's no difference here. Right, and yes, now I think we can put some content into our login page. Right, so let's go inside the login page, and let's open our login page. And what do we want to have here inside? Let's remove this login page from here. And well, inside we need a form. And we don't even need this div, we can have just this form. And inside form we need an input for username. So let's say we'll have a placeholder that will be username, and we need another one for password. So let's do input type password, and the placeholder will be password. And we need a button that will say login, and that's basically it. So we can actually do almost the same for register page, but let's copy this. I will copy this, and I will create a register page, new file, register page.js. And let's do export default function register page, and let's do return this. And for register, the button will say register, and all the inputs will be the same. Let's go to app.js, and we need to have a route for register. So let's do route. Path will be /register, and element will be register page, and we need to close the route here. Yes, and let's see, register. We have our register button, so that is really good. I'll make it back a little bigger. All right, and now it will be much better to fix the styling for login and register. So let's see, register page, we have form with action and stuff. Let's do class name of register, and same for login page. We don't need the action. Let's do class name, and let's put login. Okay, so we have class name login and class name register on those forms. Let's go back to app CSS. Let's scroll down, and let's say that form with login and form register, and we want to make them smaller. Let's say max width of 400 pixels and margin 0 auto. Yes, and now for the inputs, let's make it for all the inputs, doesn't matter if it's inside the form or not. Let's make that input will be display of type block, and let's add maybe some margin on the bottom of at least 5 pixels. Let's make it width of 100%. Let's maybe add some padding of 5 pixels. Let's fix a border of, let's maybe do border 0, and works. So next part, it would be nice to be able to register and log in. So let's go to register, and if I put something here like test, I would like to be able to register my user. So for this, we will need some backend. So we will put some basic API endpoints to our API. So first, inside API, we need an index.js, yes, and our whole React app is inside client, and now we'll put index.js inside API, and here we will put our express.js app. So first, we need to install Express. So I will open my terminal. We are inside Mern blog, that is this main directory. We need to go inside API, so let's do cd API. And now let's install Express. So let's do yarn add Express. Now I think it's installed. Let's now use Express. So let's do const Express equals require Express. I can hide my terminal and the sidebar. And now let's see, let's do const app equals Express. Now we can do app to listen on port, let's say 44,000 maybe. Yes, and let's put a test endpoint app get slash. And now here we will have an arrow function with request and response, and it will respond with JSON test OK, and it will be /test endpoint. Right, and now let's open terminal and let's do, we are inside API, let's do node index.js, and everything is fine, but instead of node, I will use nodemon. If you don't have it, you should install it. You can just Google how to install nodemon, or you can do yarn global add or install nodemon. But nodemon, what nodemon does is, if I do now nodemon index.js, every time I change something inside this file, it will restart the app, our Express app, so it will reload. So now I think it's working. So let's do localhost on 4000 /test, and we have test OK. And now if I do test OK 2, on the here on the bottom, as you will see, it restarted. So now I just need to do refresh here, and I have test OK 2. If I don't use nodemon, let's do node index.js. I have test OK 2, but if I change to test OK 3 and I refresh the browser, I still have test OK 2 because I need to restart and nodemon index.js. Now I have test OK 3, and with nodemon it restarts the app automatically. All right, but now back to our register page, we need to have a /register endpoint. So let's do /register, and this will not be get, but instead it will be post, because we want to send some information with post request. And now Now let's maybe try to send some post requests from our form, from our React app, so it will respond with a test OK free. So I will hide the terminal. Let's go back to client, our React app, source, app.js, and let's see, we need to go inside our register page. And well, here we want to make a post request from here. So first we need to fix our inputs and button input, so those will use state. So let's do const username and set username equals use state. Default will be empty string. Now same for password. And now for the username, I will do value equals username. Now I can't edit this because I need to add on change here, and I will put everything inside separate line so it will be easier to read. For the on change, we need to add, as always, for all inputs, if with React, with the event, we want to do set username with event target value. And now same for the password. Let's do value equals password, and on change, event set password, event target value, but I don't need this. Now I can edit inputs, and the values are inside the state. So now I can add on click on this button, or maybe rather on submit on this form. So let's do on submit, and let's maybe create a function called function register, and it will be called on submit on this form register. We will get event here as well, and we will run prevent default, so we will not try to redirect from this page. That is the default behavior of HTML or all of the browser. So now we want to send a request, post request. So let's use maybe fetch for this, so we don't need to install Axios or other libraries. Fetch, and we want to do a request to localhost 4000, and then we need to add some extra options to fetch, like first it will be method will be post, and then we need to also send some body, and inside body we'll send a JSON that we need to stringify, and this JSON will be just username and password, like this. And let's see, because this is a JSON, we need to send some headers. We'll send headers with content type of application JSON, like this. And now I think we have all the data for this request. Because this is an async function, we will do a wait here, and we will add async on this function. Right, and now maybe I will open network, and let's see if this will work. So let's hit register, and as you can see, we get a course error. Back to our index.js inside API, and we get this course error because let's see, access to fetch at 4000 from origin localhost 3000 has been blocked because of the course policy, and you need to add this header to your backend app. And the easiest way to do this, to not do response header stuff, is to just install. Let's go to API and let's do yarn add course, and this way we can do const course here equals require course, and now we can do just app use course, like this. And now this should work. Let's see, network, clear this, register. We get 404. Let's see why. app.js register page. Okay, we are hitting 4,000. We need to hit 4,000/register. Okay, let's clear register 200 test. Okay, free. Right, now let's maybe try to respond with the data we send, because as you can see, we are sending payload with a username and password. So let's go to index.js, and here let's try to get it. So we want to grab username and password from request body. But before we can do this, we need to be able to parse this JSON from the request. And to do this, we need to add another middleware. So let's do app use. And here we don't need to install anything. We can do just express JSON parser like this. So now let's try maybe to say that our request data was, let's put here username and password. Now if I hit register, you can see, let's see, this didn't change. I will refresh, test, register, payload is okay. This is the payload. Preview, we get request data, what we defined here, and inside this username and password that is above test. So yeah, now it works. So now we want to register this user and put this data somewhere, our username and password. So to do this, I will use Mongo database, and you can use Mongo database on your local machine, but I'd rather use online instance because it's easier to set up and to browse the records. So I will go to Mongo Atlas, sign in, and I will log in with my Google account to create a free project here. All right, so now I am logged in and I will create a new project, and let's call this one Mern blog. Next, and create project. Let's build a database, and I will use a free version. You can do the same, and the region doesn't matter for me. I can just create cluster. Now we need to pick a username and password for this user. I will do just blog, and let's auto generate this password. I will copy. I'll put it here for now. I will change it later so you guys cannot use it. Let's create this user, and I think this will work. Now let's see. Where would you like to connect from? A cloud environment or my local environment? I think it's good enough. We will not publish it for now. I will just add my local IP, and let's finish and close. Go to databases, and our database is going to be prepared here. I will hit connect, and I want to have this connect your application, so I can grab this connection string. And this connection string, I will put it here as a comment for now. And as you can see, we just need to replace this password that I copied here. So put this password here, and yeah, that should work. Now to connect with our database, I will use Mongoose because it's the most popular Mongo database library. So inside our API, let's do yarn add mongoose. And now for every collection inside our database, we need to create models. So inside our API, let's create a new directory for models, so we can create the first model that will be our user model. So let's do new file, and let's do user.js. Right, and here we need to grab mongoose. So let's do const mongoose equals require mongoose, like this. And now we can create our user model. So first we need a user schema. So let's do const user schema equals, I think it was new, and then mongoose schema, yes. Or we can do like this, that will grab schema from mongoose. So we can do just new schema. And now, what do we need inside user schema? We want to have username. That will be just a string. And but maybe we can define some validation here as well. So let's do username will be type of string. It will be required. And the minimum length will be, let's say 4. And let's say it should be also unique true. And now password will be type string and required as well. And well, that's basically it. Now let's create the model. So it's const, or maybe we can do const will be good. Const let's do user model equals model has been imported from mongoose like this. We don't need to require mongoose 2 times. I will put model here, and the first param here is the name. That will be just user, and the second is the schema. So let's do user schema, and now let's just export user model. So let's do module exports equals user model. Right, now we can use our user model inside our index.js register, so we can register users. So first we need to connect to our mongoose database. So somewhere here on the top of our script, let's do mongoose. It has been imported, connect, yes, like this. And I will put this connection string here inside. And this is async function, so I need to put a wait here. Yes, and let's see what happens now if I hit register. Does it still work? No, we get some errors, failed. Let's see. Await is only valid in async functions. All right. I guess we can just remove this await for now, because this app post will be run late enough, so the database will be already connected. Let's see now if I hit register. Yes, we get 200, and this works. Now let's try to create our user. So let's do user, and I cannot automatically import my user model, so let's do it here. Const user equals require, and we need to go inside models and then /user, and then we need to do user, and we can just do create parentheses like this, curly brackets, and we just want to put username and the password like this. We can put this as a one-liner, and this is an async function. So let's do await here. Now it's red because we need to add async here, and this will return our newly created user document. So let's move to const user doc equals this, and maybe we can just respond with JSON user document to see what's inside. Now if I hit register for test, let's see what we get. Whoops, we had a lot of, we get ID, we get test, username, password. So it has been created. Let's go and see. Let's browse collections. We have users here, and we have our first user. Let's see if I hit again. Didn't work, and this is because this failed because our username needs to be unique, so that's why this didn't work. To handle this error, we need to grab this inside the try catch. So let's do try, and let's put this inside here, and let's do catch, And let's put this JSON even here for this one run. This JSON will run if everything is okay, but if something is wrong, let's catch the exception and let's respond with status 400 and the JSON of exception. Do we have a message? Let's maybe do just exception. Now let's clear this, register again.
Hey guys, Hussein and welcome to the YouTube channel. So in this video, I'm gonna change your life. Well, I'm not and which kind of theme you like and which kind of theme you are using in your coding and stuff. So I use these few themes. The first one in my list is this dark magic theme. If I click on him, and you just have to install that, just click on this extension area, then just click on this set colors, and it has a lot of flavors right here. So if you are a night guy, you can use these dark ones, or if you are a morning guy, so you can choose these light ones as well. Okay, so if I click on this one, and here you can see this is how everything looks like, and it is still looking supremely ugly. I know that. I'm gonna change that in a few seconds, but I want you to bear with me. And here you can see it has a lot of flavors right here. In my case, I personally use this one, and it is looking cool, like when you're working with a lot of JSX and all of that. And this is how your JavaScript code will look like. This is how your CSS code will look like. And this theme is amazing, and throughout my MERN-Stack project, I'm going to be using this theme because I love this theme. This is the one, like the first one in my list. The second theme which I like, but not that much, but I do use it for, like, yeah, I do use it, but I don't like it that much. So a golden Dracula, a lot of you will like this theme because this theme is amazing. I'm gonna just click on him, and it has just only one flavor, and it looks something like this. And that's amazing too. Like in some project I will use that, but yeah, I'm not planning to. Okay, so this is the second theme in my list, and now the third theme in my list is this dark vision. And I've used this dark vision in a lot of my courses, like all of the MERN-Stack courses like Node.js, Express.js, MongoDB, and Mongoose. In all of my courses, I've used this dark vision theme because this theme is so clean and amazing. And sometime in my personal projects, I also use this theme as well. Okay, so this one is a dark vision, and the last one in my list is this Monokai Pro, but you will have to pay them because it's pro. I mean, like, you don't have to pay them, but it will give you their pop-up box again and again. Like, you have to join the pro membership, and you have to do this and that. And this is how it looks like. And this is also one of my favorite theme, and I've used that in a lot of my courses. Okay, so it has a lot of flavors, by the way. But in my case, I personally use this Monokai Pro. You can choose whichever filter you like. Okay, so yeah, it will look something like this. Amazing thing. And it has just these two flavors, and I love this flavor right here. And my list change again live this inside a version of that theme. We are going to be making our code supremely simple. So now if you don't
I was looking for some new themes to try in VS Code, and like any good developer do now is set this as my color theme. So I'm going to set this as my color theme, but they're very like muted, kind of one of my favorites. So if you've heard of that one, just saw. So let's go ahead and set this. It's very, and then the
with the green in here. I like that green, although I like the other green a little bit better. And then the red or slash like a darker salmon almost is kind of cool. And then like muted yellow in here makes it feel even a little more aggressive, but I like the way the colors play off of each other, and I like it on a dark background, just maybe a little less dark, if that makes sense. But I think this is a really cool one. At only 2,200 installs, you could be like one of a handful of people that actually have that installed. All right, next up is Andromeda. Now, this is a bigger one as well. So I included a couple. You'll have, so this is another kind of muted one. They also have a few different versions. A lot of these colors actually have a lot of similarities. The background changing makes a huge difference. So that's one more big one, and we'll get into more of the small palette here. Very muted, even more so than what we've seen before. I have much of that pop of yellow and red, etc. I like the way that the blue and the green kind of to this, but I believe it's 1,900 installs. Let's go ahead and set this, and there's a couple of different ones. So there's Gentle Builder and Gentle Dark. So let's go back to our index page. And I kind of wish this color was different. I kind of wish that wasn't, it's probably a light gray, but like basically a white color. I wish that had a little more color to it. But I think this works really well as well. Works. Comments below. But Gentle Themes is another cool one there. Before we and highlight developer punk. And this is a bigger one, not as big as the split one in beta. That's kind of, let's go ahead and set it to, ooh, they've got a scarlet one in beta. That's kind of intense. This definitely has the cyberpunk feel to it. I don't love the red in here. I feel like there's a little bit too much color in here. This is kind of cool, especially if like you had a themed setup, like if that was a color that you used in your room. This was cyberpunk, and then there was, I thought they had a couple of different ones in here. Let's go back to cyberpunk set color theme. The activate I love this. It's got almost like an ice feel with the white, with my favorite themes. I think I had seen this one before that I've never used. So let's just go to basic Moonlight. It's like kind of basic, but I think it's really clean and really simple. Color you see around is developer. I'd never used it, and let's go nice add in as well. So that is Moonlight. And then let's go to the Vitesse theme. This is one I'd never heard of. Also, as a developer, I'd never used light themes. So I'm kind of curious. Let's start with Vitesse Light. And you can, like, my eyes are having to adjust. This is very different for me. I never change this to, let's not do black. I like maybe dark soft. I love getting into like that darker gray type stuff. This feels like a very earthy thing, like the green, the yellow that's almost, or like a brownish yellow in a gray back. Dark theme. Anyway, that's the Vitesse theme. And then duotone, they have a ton of colors. Color between these two, other than like voice to not. I thought Anna, you can assume like with the blue right next to it, and then orange. I almost wish this was like blue again. Like I feel like a whole line of that would make sense, because mixing in that orange is a little tough, but I kind of like the pops of the like pure banana colored. This one, very few work really well. The green or blue again. Again, let me know in the comments. Have you heard of and or used any of these before? And what is now the next? Now this one's fun. Put in my other ones because you don't really have much of that pop of yellow and red, etc. I like the way that the blue and the, let's go ahead and set this, and there's basically a white color. I wish that had, a lot of these colors actually have a lot of similarities. The background change. So I included a couple. You'll have like 10 of these are smaller, and then you'll have some background with the colors on top of it, with the pop of purple, and this is kind of cool. And then like muted yellow in here. This is a really cool one. At only 2,200 installs, you could be like one of a handful of people that actually have that installed. All right, next up is Andromeda. Now this is a bigger one as well. So I included a couple. You'll have like 10 of these are smaller, and then you'll have some big ones. I included this one because I think this branding is so cool. Like this is obviously a company that like has good branding and stuff. So this is another kind of muted one. They also have a few different